Welcome to this podcast on the EU AI regulation brought to you by Brooklyn Solutions. I am the head of sales at Brooklyn Solutions. I've been in software for more years than I care to count in various roles between sales and customer success and development and product management, those kinds of things. I'm joined by my colleague, Nick Francis. I'm the talking one. Nick is the smart one. Nick is Brooklyn's co-founder, CTO, CISO. You got a bunch of hats, my friend,
Yes,
which I very much
life,
appreciate.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
All companies, lots of different roles.
Exactly. And we're here to talk to you about the AI regulations put in place by the European Union and really a little bit of background on that, and we're going to get into what it is and why it's important for you to be thinking about it right now. There are 127 articles in this regulation, so it's fairly comprehensive. They were clearly fairly forward-thinking when they thought about it. And it's interesting because it does not apply to just the EU, but it reaches outside the EU, as actually many regulations that the EU has put in place do. And maybe give us just a little bit about kind of inception and how it came about and how things have been going in terms of regulating and enforcing it.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I think the regulation or the regulators have very obviously increased their interest in a lot of financial service dealings ever since 2008. And they were before that, so the PRA, EBA, FCA, they've all increased the legislation they're putting out there. And they tend to do it in a similar way, which is they tend to inform that it's going to come. They'll tend to put it in place like they have with this a couple of years ago. No one really paid a lot of attention at that point. And slowly over that period of a few years, they increase the likelihood that they're going to enforce it. So although, like you rightly said, this has been in place and been discussed since 2024, it came in a bit more stringently in 2025. But in August 2026 this year, it starts being kind of something that they're going to audit for. So they're going to actually go look at firms and see if they've actually adhered to the regulation. And like I said, that's standard practice and standard MO for what regulators do around.
It takes a couple of years to understand how best to enforce and be practical with it.
And whereas we as a business timed Brooklyn Solutions to launch pretty much when the EBA material outsourcing regulation came in about how you need to look at your critical suppliers and the things you need to go through.
Yeah.
And that was extended to the PRA and then DORA. They all went in the same kind of way. We all expected it at the point of creation and signing and go live for them to get really interested. But as it seems like people are getting more excited now about DORA, more excited about the EBA and the PRA regulations on outsourcing over the last couple of years. So it does lag a little bit. The way I look at this is a lot of what we see in innovation through what we was doing in the last 15 years, sort of digital transformation, the rise of cloud, mobile apps, etc. You've got history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? And to have any chance of getting in front of it, you can't wait until it's done or understood, because by that time you are well behind it.
It's too late.
You've got to start understanding it as it's implemented, as it's deployed. I think there's no different with this, and I think kind of hats off to the regulators, right? At least for trying to put something down. And we'll see later on in some of these slides that we're going through and just using as discussion pointers, right?
Yep.
What different regions are doing. But yeah, it's nice to see.
Kind of put some context around it. So we thought it might be good to compare it or frame it up in the same way that GDPR works. I think people have a familiarity with GDPR. GDPR has been around long enough now that there's maybe more broader common understanding. So Nick, maybe I just ask you to kind of walk through and how does this EU AI Act align to or work maybe similar to the way GDPR does?
Topic's totally different, right?
Yeah.
What it's doing, but I suppose the parallels are that it's data-esque, so it's about data.
Yep. Yeah.
From a alliance to the EU AI Act, the key thing here, which was the big thing around GDPR, is the size of the fine, right? It was 4% for GDPR of global turnover, but now that's, for this one, it's gone up to some percent of global turnover.
Pretty crazy. I think the other thing in terms of a comparison that I think is interesting is the receivers, somebody receiving a cold call, somebody getting marketed to, etc. I don't think they realized where their data was. You make the data, you bring it up, kind of data is the kind of common ground for comparison between the two acts. I think that it's also very similar as people are using AI in a very base way. I just go to ChatGPT or I go to Claude.ai and I start chatting and I'm talking and all of that. I don't think people have a real concept of where that data is going and what's going on.
I think the difference between GDPR and the AI thing for me is GDPR was more around you have data, what are you legitimately able to do with it? So acting on data. What we'll see more of at the moment with the AI legislation, it seems more around determining direction of travel on what you're being told by the AI. So
Yeah.
it comes, you will put data in, AI will do some including and reasoning, and what you then can't just outsource to the AI is the decision-making factor. So there's a level of, as you can see on the screen here, from prohibited to high risk to limited risk and minimal risk around what, not that you're using AI, so don't be wrong about or think about it saying you cannot use AI. It's more a scale of you can use AI, but how much you use AI for to determine outcomes of certain conditions and certain things. And as you can see on the screen here, some of it from so what's prohibited, banned outright, is like use of surveillance and emotion recognition in employees, social scoring and subliminal manipulation, so like the coercion kind of element of it, trying to use AI to get someone to do something that might not be in their interest,
Yeah.
or to determine something in someone's emotional state in work, right? And that's like totally fully prohibited. And if you look down at the high risk ones, so looking at how they're being used across specific sectors and businesses and in certain situations around providing oversight. It reminds me, without changing speech too quickly, it reminds me of, I can't remember when it came in, it was post 2008, and they brought something, especially in the UK, that was referred to as the senior managers regime.
Yeah.
That basically meant if you've got a C-level or VP level job, you can't outsource all responsibility for something that happens within your organisation and your team. And we saw some fines on this, on some failings within certain large company IT teams where the CIO, not only did the company get a fine from the regulator, the CIO personally got a fine from the regulator for failing to act or control the program of which was in their remit in a fashion, right? So what it meant is that the roles that are under the senior manager regime, which is like the C-suite, etc., and a bit more, they can't go, I wasn't aware. But if it happened in their team, there's a potential they're personally liable. They must be aware. They must have governance. They must have oversight. The reason I bring that up is it just reminds me very much of that, in the fact that whereas you've got the C-suite that were a senior manager regime and regulated, it's saying here that you're responsible for the AI, so thus you are all, as taking the outcome of AI, you almost all become like a senior manager that has to be responsible and view and be in the loop to ensure that the AI isn't deciding stuff in your organisation or your teams and your department's behalf without you having that oversight. So it's almost not, for senior manager regime makes you personally liable, right? So I'm not saying that's extending, but the sentiment of being responsible for something else that's calling the direction of travel is absolutely.
Essentially, if you were a people manager and you had a person working for you that acted irresponsibly, you would have some responsibility to that action by your employee. And look, I love the analogy because I think it's near exactly the same thing. If you are using AI to do work that you're responsible for, that agent, that set of agents, that agentic workflow is, at the end of the day, your employee, right? You're responsible for managing it, for what they do, for the decisions that get made, etc. It's interesting to me because I'm thinking about kind of a practical example and to put some of this risk stuff in context. And my oldest son, his first job out of university was as an underwriter for a mortgage company. All right. So here I think about the fact that it's a fairly rote thing. It's a flow chart, right? There's a set of criteria that he has to go through and check off and all of that. There isn't really necessarily a lot of human creativity involved, right? So it is something you look at. What a great candidate for, yeah, it's regulated, but it's a great candidate for automation because essentially you're doing the same things over and over again. Now bring in the fact that, and the reason he left was because he basically, his responsibility was to review at least 14 mortgages a day. And he was like, Dad, with everything that I have to go through and check, I'm lucky to get 10 and I'm getting behind and all those kinds of things. So now the temptation, if I'm the mortgage company, is like, hire college grads to do this. I can put AI agents, a bank of AI agents, and they're working 24/7, 365 reviewing mortgages. And you know what? Do I really need to look at every mortgage that the AI agent decided to accept or not accept?
Yeah.
But so that's, to me, that's the great example of like, oh my God, like my mortgage gets rejected because the AI agent decided that, or we accept the high risk mortgages for whatever. That's where I think things become really interesting.
So those determination of processes around financial services, like a scoring system that says, can you get this loan? Can you get this? Can you? A lot of that with the right detail is automated today anyway. to the point of decision. And then in your son's example, had to do 13 a day, was doing 10, etc. Had to chase it around a bit. Now, absolutely, if you look at that's a prime candidate for AI automation to be able to do that role a lot quicker and present it back to him. Not necessarily to make your son's role redundant, but to make him more performant and vex his throughput. So rather than 13, if the AI has all the collection of all the data and puts it all in a single nice central thing for him to look at, you can do 50 a day. So it's always better, and we find this with looking at contract data. We're like, why did the AI do that? And we look at the prompt, we look at the data. And the majority of the time, you side with the AI. You go, that clause was written terrible, and it was overridden elsewhere in the document. So you confused anyone that read them together, you'd confuse them. So that's a contractual legal issue. And we've seen it before.
Bring us back into now thinking about this EU regulation applies, right?
Yeah, funny enough, if you do that, so these things you can see on the slide at the moment, look at the red ones. If you just read them in the context of, like I said, a person to person, would you allow an employee to score and rank something and get it all approved without any review? Would you allow an employee not to go through? Would you allow a coder to not go through peer review?
Of course not. Of
course. Basically, what it's saying. So it's obvious and it's very basic, the things that the legislation is saying, but it's basically saying that is you won't allow the AI to score and rank and rubber stamp something without you looking.
You do it because you know it's good practice and you know the impact of not doing it is lost revenue to the company or angry customers or whatnot, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right? This actually now puts oversight in place so that folks who think to themselves like, it's not that big a deal, I'm just going to go ahead and let it happen, actually now need to step back and say, I don't know, like there needs to be oversight. I'm not going to go ahead and look at my supplier scorecard generated solely by AI and make decisions about it without actually looking through it.
It's back. This is why I try and simplify it, because you get too caught up in the tech and the AI and the nuts and bolts of what it does, when actually the regulation, I don't think, is in the spirit is getting about that in terms of what model you use, how you tweak it, how you engineer it. I don't think it's getting down to those technical layers. But what it's doing is, again, it's without repeating that sort of outcome and oversight. And let's remove the AI on the example you just gave. A process. The process is run by multiple people. That process has someone that's ultimately accountable for the process, but all the steps within it might be responsible by several different individuals. And it's a sequential process, flow diagram left to right. Typically in those examples, you need the steps or the pre-steps to get the information for the next steps, right?
Yep.
Back to your son's example.
Yeah.
You're reliant on the people in those responsible blocks to do their job to the right degree, to not miss out information.
And assuming that they did when I receive it to do my part.
Yeah, and then when it goes, something spectacularly goes wrong and you go and walk back the process and you go, Jeff or Sally missed that part of the data there, like going through it intently with a specialist SME that came in to look at it. Missed that step there. Jeff and Sally are doing 50 of those a day, right? And they're not 30 years of experience like you and I. They've been on it for 2 weeks and just trained in, right? Failing. Turn Sally and Jeff into an AI.
Is it technically? Yeah, wouldn't it be technically a regulatory failure?
Everyone did their job with the best intent. There was no malicious. The regulation's not there to stop problems, right? It's not to stop the problem from happening. It's to say, did you do the best you could? It's best governance for you to not get the outcome that's bad. So
I think this is
not there to
this
stop.
Is a great point.
Stop, and it's like IT, right? You're not there to stop issues. There's always going to be issues. When issues occur and they look into it,
it's intent. It's the intent.
If they try at least and have the right processes in place to try and deal with this and to someone sign it off. To that point you gave around reading contracts at scale, this will happen, and it does happen.
Yeah.
You've got some 1,000 contracts. 1,000 of them have got the clause you're interested in, and all different variants of that written by all different lawyers and all different quality standards. So take time out of the picture. You've got an army of people in to do it, to read through it, to then come back and go, sounds like 1,000 have got the clause in you want, but there's so much variation between it. Are we covered? What does that mean? And there's so much data there that you're going to slip a little bit.
It'll happen, right? Yeah, it'll happen.
There'll be a little bit of a gap, but you're hopefully at the 99 percentile. The only difference with AI is going to do it quicker. It's going to do and read that quicker, and it's going to get that inference. My GCSEs at English weren't a great grade. I was great by a pass with my GC English, right? AI writes better than AI reads better than me, right? AI picks inference up over a long document. This is a conversation I have regularly, which is we see in the industry, use AI what AI is good at. Don't try and trick with reasoning and give it sneaky little things. And we see a lot of that, especially what we're engineering. We have testing, etc. And customers come back and go, oh, I asked it this because, yeah, you've asked it a question that you're good at, that you know you're going to trip it up on, right? It doesn't come back to you and can you read those 1,000 pages in 60 seconds? Because you go, no. And go, okay. It's not you're trying to one up.
So stop. Yeah, exactly.
It's building a team, right? You're building a team and work out what the AI is good at. It's definitely, it's much better at you than a lot of things, and you are still much better at it some stuff than
it will be.
Right? Work out what those bits are. And that's what I think is to bring it back, the Regulations Act, which is use AI, what AI is good at. You have the determination, you take all the data, you collate it, you have all the inputs. Some of those inputs will be derived from an AI system. Show that you're doing the right level of governance and check-in just to make sure the next step you make in the direction of travel has been approved by the right authority.
So because AI is doing it, don't assume that because the AI did it, that it's still right or that mistakes don't happen. They do. Think of the AI in the same way that you would think about a human employee potentially. Why is this important now? Well, it's important now because we've got an event coming up in terms of regulation starting August 1st. And the size of the penalties can be not just the size of the penalty, as we're talking about here, depending on the tier of the issue or what happens, but the consequence. If you are engaged in a prohibited practice, not only are you going to get a huge penalty, but the EU has the right to come in and just simply shut that off, which then could have catastrophic implications depending on what you are doing and what part of your business that's involved in.
Yeah, I always, for these things, I separate out I always write off the malicious intent. Right? There's organisations or there's things or there's people out there that are using every bit of technology in a malicious way to exploit and to gain.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. We're talking those that are just evilly going full gung-ho into using AI or actually stated a position. This is what we used to see a lot with like mobile technology and cloud and SaaS, is the organisation fails to state a position on the new technology and their shadow IT and people and their company and their employees. All they want to do is a good job, right? It's not malicious. They just want to do a good job. They want to get faster. They want to do it coverage.
Take advantage of the latest.
Yeah, and then you found what was the and SaaS stuff, which like someone's put like 10 grand's worth of SaaS software across all the company cards. And it's like, we don't see any of that data. What are they using? So they had to then cycle of bringing that back into governance. And a lot of the ones who I found didn't win in that space or really struggled with it was because they failed, to your point earlier, to get in front of it early, to state a position that's acceptable for the companies. So the companies have got a responsibility to say, I know AI is out there. And this is why it makes me cringe when I see organisations and people saying, we still get it, we can't use cloud. We can't use AI. So it's just such a naive, lazy position because your employees are going home. Their kids are using AI.
They're using it's already happening. Yeah,
they're using AI, and what they're doing is when they use AI and they put it in an email back to you, even though you said not to, they're just removing the dashes that are a very obvious key thing that AI's written there.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't even aware. This is back to my failing of English. I wasn't even aware that was punctuation that existed. It's like you don't look for something so you don't see it. And then you start using AI and you start getting those piped characters.
Yeah, and you're like, seeing these things.
What is that? And I start seeing it in books I'm reading. I go, oh, it is a thing. And that now for me is a telltale sign, is because no normal person sending an email puts enough of those dash kind of...
Actually,
I don't know what they're called.
in.
Do you know what they're called?
I don't.
It's like the double length, isn't it? And you go, AI wrote that.
Yeah, that sounds obvious.
And so that's the cottage industry at the moment, the companies that say you can't use AI. You've got people that are using AI, pasting it into Outlook as a response or a document, and they're spending their time removing those dashes because they go...
Now they don't know if you use the AI. Yeah.
So my point is, on that, make a position and make a policy around what you want your employees to do with AI.
As opposed to just ignoring it or turning it off or preventing it. Yeah, actually. And I think this regulation actually helps with that in a big way.
Right.
I think the regulation, to a degree, if you look at the things here, actually does some of that. Is that fair? In terms of helping you understand. Look, I look at the things here, do an inventory of where you're using AI. So be aware of it. Understand how you're using it in terms of use class. The one here, this AI literacy training, like I think that is hugely important. I find that even in our company, that there are folks that probably aren't as up to speed as they should be. And then as we deal with customers like that, kind of impacts our ability to do that successfully.
Yeah, I think what you can do with regulation easily is go, that's just layering cost upon cost for our business and making it harder for the smaller companies or even companies to do their job. It's seen as like red tape, right? But I think if you look at regulation the other way round, which is how's the regulation going to help me improve my processes in terms of efficiency, scaling, and being compliant to move into this space. So the examples you see here, like AI literacy training, or the point you just made, I think that's a business advantage anyway, even though the regulation's saying that.
Agreed.
parts of this that says you'll get benefit out of that.
Yeah.
Like, even though the regulator's saying you should do that, and you could easily look at that going, oh, that's another computer-based training that's done quarterly, or when people
Put
join,
everybody
people
through.
click,
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you a test in the checkbox? Yes, I do. I swear I've read it all. You could look at it like that, and you could deploy it like that, just so you check the box of the regulator. A lot of companies do that, right? Or you could look at it in a way that says, actually, that's not a bad idea.
It gives me a competitive advantage. It
Exactly.
improves my workforce.
It's no different to what you do in your business today. It's just there's a slight bit more of an onus to be able to explain. This is where the tech comes in, and the way you put the tech and deploy the tech together. You've got, back to my earlier point, several steps. You've got someone accountable for a process. You've got several steps where several individuals are responsible. Push comes to shove, they've documented their work, they have a bunch of emails, they show you the thought process they went through, the process design had made them gather steps and evidence along the way, and they can end up in a meeting with said oversight, either be internal risk, external risk, or the regulator, to go through and go, why did you make that decision? And it might be a few years ago, normally is, and the person can look through all their notes and then go, this was my interpretation, this is why I did it, etc. You're going to have the same with the AI. So you're going to have the ability to be able to go back. And this is similar to, I'd say it's similar, you tell me if it's similar, but I know your previous company, albeit a tech stack, was doing like a lot of observability of logs.
Yep.
And I think there's an opportunity there for that ex-company that you worked for to say that you're going to have to interrogate and have the ability of why the AI made the decision it did when you asked it the question.
Actually, one of the challenges that we would sell into is that there were compliance requirements that all logs had to be, you had to have every log from every system for a certain amount of time, or every system that did certain things, especially financial. You had to have 2 years worth of logs, and because you would get audited, and there'd be cases where there would be an issue, and we need to trace that issue and all of that. And yeah, absolutely.
So that's where this is what the regulator's quite good at. If you look at it, it becomes a spider's webs of connected regulation. So this is the AI one. But what you draw a conclusion to there, and you've connected there, is you've got a data retention regulation and requirement of 7 years worth of data. So you can see easily already that I need to be able to see why the AI did something, how it did it, and why it made that determination. I need to retrospectively be able to go back and inspect that. Not only of the approval of why I approved it in the moment, but historically go back and see, should I be audited? And you've got to retain that somehow for 7 years to be with your data retention. So they start connecting, and and this is what common happens with the regulator. You'll see some of the fines come out, and if you look at some of the detail, it can be a bit boring to walk through, but they came in probably on a customer finding or a customer issue, and they've worked all the way through the stack of the org, and they've connected all these different regulations, and then unlucky for the company sometimes, what the determination will be is they're fined this much because they infringed this reg over here, this reg over here, this reg.
They missed some things.
Compound effect. It could be because they didn't keep the data, they couldn't see the data, they couldn't recall it.
So then really the burden of responsibility here with this AI regulation isn't actually all of that different than any other regulation in terms of being able to show evidence of how things were done and who did it and when it was done and all of
Good
that.
practice.
Yeah,
Apply best practice, find a good practice, show that you're thinking about it. There's no guarantee you're going to come out of it. Everything changes between regulation, regulator, the auditor that comes in. There's so many variables in it, but you can demonstrate you did the right thing and had the right checks and balances that's best practice aligned. You've got a good chance of being all right. Like I said before, it's not about stopping problems happening. It's about reducing problems happening. And if they do happen, that they're in the best intent and
that you did everything you could. Yeah, that you were actually acting and working in good faith.
Yeah.
All right. So thinking about then the practical technological aspect of things and how different companies are using AI now, bring that into play. Because I know for us and the way that we've put AI in Brooklyn, I think we've encapsulated some of these things so that when you use Brooklyn, a lot of the things that you need to do in terms of being responsible to the regulation are already there, versus if you are doing, I guess what I would say more of a DIY, which is I've got Claude or I've got ChatGPT, Copilot, and I'm simply using those generically in different places.
Users go their own way. You've got no chance on the observability and the recall. They're all personal accounts, right? So however good that model is, and it could have made the right decision, if someone comes in and says, tell me where that decision was made, and that person left the organisation, or, oh, it was in Johnny's personal Claude file.
Oops. Yeah.
Could have been the best recommendation ever, right? Could have not done anything wrong. The model got it completely right, but you can't inspect it or recall it.
Because you've got no record of it because it was not, it wasn't done.
Record keeping failed.
Interesting.
So I think the systems, and what this slide's getting at is that every user, every conversation, be it hard-coded prompts or be it conversational engagement of a large language model through a window. Everything's logged, everything's journaled. The system can't execute the final step to accept the completion of a task, right? We force that, and we'll see a bit more of what we call that later on. You have the right policies in place that at least state your position for AI and what you want from it and what you expect of your employees, what they can and can't use. That if you're using AI in your solution that you're selling to customers, or AI is part of that, you're giving them some kind of forward-looking interpretation of your internal policy, but in a more AI assurance sense. So like, I assure my work. Like what was the clause in contracts you see over here, which is with the right level of skill, care, and attention. So it means that you're qualified and you have the right due diligence, the right skills, and the right focus in the discipline of which you're deploying those services. That's you assuring that, like a plumber does what the plumber does because they're signed off and they're registered and they're gas safe registered. The electrician is registered and has been trained and is regularly inspected.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So, but your AI assurance is saying, similar to that, we assure you that we're using the right levels and the right gates and checks and balances around the AI.
So the answer is not just turn it off and don't use it. The answer is use it the right way. And
so do that for everything. We don't do like human in the loop for step.
Right? All right. So tell me, what do I need to have in place? What do I need to make sure that I'm doing by the 2nd of August?
If you're a big organisation, you should be doing a lot of it already. It's just refactoring it into the right nomenclature
Agreed.
for this regulation.
Yeah.
In theory, you should know. So you've already got a critical systems log and a log of all the applications that you're allowing your organisation to use and run. Right? So that then, what is your AI inventory? It's just a step down from, all right, these are all my apps. What's got AI?
The apps that you've already been cataloging and keeping a portfolio of anyway.
And there is a level of sympathy there because companies are popping AI in their left, right, and centre because it's such a wave and buzz.
Yeah.
Last couple of years, it's like the AI of everything. So we must have AI in our software. Get it in there. For one, all your key and critical system, to start with them and to say what out of the box has got AI in it now, and from that, what's making decisions or doing determination, and are we involved, even at the smallest degree of, like I said, bookend, like beginning, end, at a minimum, and then from that point, you can then get more involved and say, I want more involvement, and I want to be in on this step, etc. That's down to your design. At which point, like it says here, brief the board, right, in terms of all our software will end up having AI in it, or an AI variant, or an agentic AI, because it's where the industry's going. Our suppliers and our providers of these solutions, you can't afford not to have it in there because it's table stakes. Right?
So then tell me a little bit, and maybe this is where we start to bring things to a wrap. What is it? So we've been talking about the responsibility of the organization. What is my responsibility as an organization to my AI vendors and to potentially, so people I'm getting direct AI directly from, and what about maybe any other suppliers? Do I care about how are my supply being compliant with this regulation? Is that my responsibility?
That's your responsibility. Can't outsource that. You might see it change. What did we see a little bit? So bits of DORA in the EBA, and there's some things in the UK that the PRA is doing called critical third parties that goes and links back to HMG Treasury having a list of like almost critical companies to even national infrastructure or have been critical for an industry, have been flagged, will go on that list. And there's a level there where they're starting to extend the boundary from, it's not just a regulated entity that's got to meet these requirements and it's all on the banks. It's like if you're tagged as a critical third party that's used by a bank, you've got the responsibility to be doing things in a compliant manner anyway. So down the supply chain, they can prove compliance.
So there's
down.
Absolutely some third-party risk management aspects to all of this as well that you have to make sure that you're considering.
What does that mean? That means you should expect over time your supplier, the bigger ones at least in these spaces, will have to work in the same way that you are. So there's a shared burden there.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't rely on that. As it says and suggests here, start auditing your AI vendors to ensure that you can comply with the regulation. The spirit of the regulation is about, like we said, logging, observability, decision-making, human in the loop. Basically everything we said Brooklyn does.
Yeah.
Go and check if your vendor's got AI that at least at a minimum standard they can follow the same kind of, won't be exactly the same, but similar logic.
Something similar, yeah.
That what Brooklyn do is in that product as well. And then, and not always guaranteed, in theory, if you do that with all your vendors that have got AI, the sum of the parts adds up to the whole and compliant, right?
Indeed.
But yeah, there's a lot of detail in there to work.
Very good.
But it's no different from any other regulation that's dropped or coming, right? It's like, what's the scope of the regulation? What's it interested in? What parts of my business does it touch?
Do the due diligence that you should be doing anyway and apply it to AI take caution to understand where that AI is applied and how it's being used. Make sure that you have the ability to make it auditable. You're keeping all of that data. You've got the ability to grab it and get it using platforms like Brooklyn. Make all of that easier so that you're not having to do unnatural acts to be able to recall all of those things.
But don't also go over the top. Make sure that you understand, and this is the thing that we say time and time again. It comes back to how well do you understand your business and your business critical processes, right? What are your critical processes, the level of decision making in it that is in this kind of spirit of like, if you looked at all the use cases of what they're regulating, etc. for, it's like, where do we do that? Because then you can get rid of a lot of processes that you don't need to worry about because they're not doing that.
Think about where it's most important.
So don't get it all mixed up and say, I've got to do this for all my processes that use AI everywhere. That's not the case. It's whether it's coming with the outcomes that they're looking for and you have a system that does that. And it's even good practice to do that without AI, right? Which is like,
Even if you're not using AI.
What processes are having these decision elements and things involved with it? And then do we use AI? And at what point do we use AI? And is it ungoverned and no oversight? Then you're going to have this kind of...
And am I keeping a log? Is it audible? Do I have can I trace it? And
you're doing the triage that goes down the funnel from all the business processes to the scope of the legislation around where those processes are that do this kind of thing, to where's the AI used in those processes, to where the human isn't doing the oversight. And that's your target, and that's going to be your refinement journey program that goes from everything to these 50 things here. Need some ping around and some investigation to say, vendor A, if we was asked the spirit of these questions, can your solution provide and comply? Assurance that's the case.
That's it.
That came to us. We go, here's our assurance AI.
Here it is.
Here's our human in the loop approach. This is what we guarantee will happen. Covered.
Fantastic. It's good, Nick. Thanks very much. As always, enjoyed the discussion. I hope you did as well. If you think of anything, interested in knowing more, please feel free to reach out. Contact us at info@brooklynsolutions.ai. Would love to help you think through this if you've got any concerns. Thanks, everybody.